Hi, Drew.
Hi, Drew. Come and join us for the intro. Here he is. Yes, today's show is with Elissa. Last time she was on this show, she was here with a vibrator, which is... Yes, today's show is with Elissa. Last time she was on this show, she was here with a vibrator, which is...
And you know, this is actually something that I relate to very strongly because a lot of my early training as a singer was so technical that it ignored this issue of how to bring myself into the song.
That was fake. That one was
I know,
fake.
I felt it. I felt that fake. Shut, I mean, you don't even tell me. 'Cause I knew. I did it. Who's he anyway? Like, you're the expert.
Oh, that one got me.
I actually didn't necessarily get a huge bullshit reading in that moment, I have to be honest, but...
Was it that? It was that, wasn't it?
It was like, you know, halfway.
It was coming out. Definitely coming out.
Is that the awkward I love you
Yeah.
in a way? Oh, he loves that. Do you see? He likes a good old ear scratch. Yes, Elissa is going to be here sharing us her thoughts on connecting to your impulses for the purposes of expression and also some breathing techniques and her tips on that. And Elissa's very much like the holistic approach, right? To singing and speech, even in general.
Which some people can be a little bit cynical about.
Yep.
Or just not. It's just not their thing. You know. I know. I back in the day was all about let's get this going. Let's get this going. Fire this baby up.
But the further you go down the line, you have those revelations and things where you just think, oh, your whole body and your life and your mind.
Yeah. Singers are humans.
Trashing everything. But we have got a request for you, haven't we?
Yeah, because it comes from some very bad news, doesn't it, Christopher?
Yeah. We asked you for some reviews on iTunes. Thanks for those of you that gave us a review. We got a 1 star from someone out there.
I think it was a troll.
Is it? 'Cause we can't be that bad, can we?
Who would ever? The thing is, even if it was a troll, troll or no troll, it's brought the percentage down, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. We're not 100% 5-star anymore. So, thanks to that person. Do you think they might have been going through
The old stuff.
the old stuff? Yes, the old stuff. But you have to live with that, in all honesty, don't you?
Yeah.
With the first few episodes and everything else you put out there, you have to deal with that. You have to leave that out there.
Like the old performances.
Yeah. And if you didn't, if you thought, oh, I better wait until I know everything, you would never fucking release anything.
No.
Would you?
No.
You've just got to say it. If you, let's say you're a teacher or someone out there doing something like that, you've just got to start spewing it out, basically, and not be worried about what people think. As long as you put in the work in, and you can have a bit of confidence that that you care, your motivations are correct. And down the line, you'll inevitably say stuff where you're like, okay, I don't believe that anymore.
Yeah. Still doesn't deserve a 1 star though.
No.
So, if we could, sure you got a bit of time over Christmas, a bit of downtime. Please go ahead, iTunes, on the iTunes store.
On the iTunes app. Give us a review on there. You can write words. That would be great.
You can write words.
You can write words as opposed to just clicking the stars. You know,
drawing pictures.
Doesn't say much.
It's in other news. The VIP Teacher Forum.
Yes.
In San Fran.
So there's a big event going on in San Francisco in March 2017. It's run by the network of teachers that we're fortunate enough to work with called Vocology in Practice. Their website is vocologyinpractice.com. But the event seems to be focused around a lot of style and artistry, as well as some guest speakers on voice science and technique as well. So it's well worth going. I mean, we've been to many of those events, right? And the caliber of people that they get in. Unbiased people I'd like to add?
That's the point, isn't it? Because a lot of time teacher networks, they're very exclusive, and so you can only go to these events if you are part of the network. And everyone, there'd be a lot of places around the world that do this. They are offering knowledge from people they bring in, people within the network, and it's just a geek out for 2 to 3 days. So then you come home pumped, motivated to get back into teaching again. You got loads of new information, loads of new energy. But this is open to everyone, as VIP is very broad,
yeah.
Open to new ideas, not stuck in a one way. So for any teachers out there that are looking to get motivated, get some more knowledge, and have a holiday to San Fran.
And probably a few free sandwiches, I would have thought.
It's very affordable, actually.
Yeah, how much is it?
Can't remember.
But it's about 300 something?
Something like that. But I do remember just thinking, wow, that's really decent.
Yeah.
Because normally they can, which is because what the guys have done is and just to say, because obviously I'm on the board at the moment, and so I'm in all the conversations, so I can be completely transparent about that. Is that it's done to get people there, because these high prices for other courses often put people off from the off, and this is about just people coming, sharing information, and then going off into their little world.
Yeah, amazing.
Yep.
So if you want to find out some more information about that, you can go to vocologyinpractice.com/forum 2017. So yeah, get yourself along to that. But for now, let's just get into the episode with Elissa.
Right, we are here breaking new ground with cameras on us, but also in front of the laptop, all the way across the Atlantic Ocean with Elissa. I'm going to say it right.
Come on.
Weinzimmer.
You did it.
Yes. Is that a wine sipper or?
It's actually, Zimmer means room in German, so wine is wine, so it's like a wine cellar.
Oh, really? What a great thing to be named after. Are you taking after your name by quaffing wine constantly?
I mean, I did last night, so yeah.
And from the time difference, we got you out of your slumber by the look of it.
I hope I did my hair nice, but
you look wonderful.
You guys are ahead of me. I'm in New York City.
So from New York City, owner at Voice Body Connection. Also a previous guest on our show with the vibrant voice technique. Graduate of Alberta University. Residing in New York City as a teacher, voice specialist, acting, speech, singing, the bunch. So there's a lot going on. So what do you tell us about, like, what you're up to right now with everything?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so yeah, my business is called Voice Body Connection, and I like to say what I do really is help people bust through the barriers that they have in their voice and their body, right? And that means that could be singers, that could be public speakers, that could be I work with a lot of actors. I am an actor myself and a singer as well. And lately I've been really excited about teaching online. And so I have launched an online class called How Your Voice Works that explains the anatomy and mechanics of the human voice. And I basically my work falls into two categories at this point, which is that I educate people on vocal health. I call myself a vocal health educator. And then I also work with people on presence. So how to become more present in your singing, in your speaking, in your life.
Wow, and what led you to that?
So I have a little bit of a story that brought me here. I was doing a lot of performing growing up. There was a sunken living room in my parents' house growing up, and so the foyer was up a little bit higher, and that was clearly a stage to me from a very young age. So I would perform shows with my brother and sister, put them to work as my cast, and performed all through growing up into high school and college. And when I was actually in my senior year at the University of Southern California, at that point I was singing in an a cappella group. I was performing in musicals. I was starting to do some directing actually as well. But I lost my voice and it was really mysterious at the time. Basically, I woke up one morning and it felt like I had shards of glass in my throat and it hurt to swallow. And obviously I was super terrified, and I wound up at the ENT that week and then ultimately getting a second opinion shortly afterward. And I didn't really get any conclusive feedback about exactly what had happened, but I was told that I had experienced vocal trauma and my vocal cords had bled, so, there was a hemorrhage. And I needed to go on vocal rest for a month and then learn better habits with speech therapy afterwards. And so the whole experience, I really was the choir kid, really praised for my voice and everything for a long time growing up and took it for granted and thought it would always be there, and also was the person who felt like I can warm up when I want to. If I don't feel like warming up today, I don't really have to. And it changed my perspective on everything when I lost my voice, and ultimately set me on this path to get really curious about how my voice worked and what exactly had happened to me and how to solve it and heal myself. And of course, in the process of learning to heal myself, I very quickly decided I wanted to help other people avoid this same situation. And I'll just say that part of why my work with Vibrant Voice Technique, why it has been so important to me personally, is because ultimately a huge factor in what was going on with my voice was muscle tension dysphonia. That's the fancy way of saying muscle tension had caused me, and overuse and vocal abuse had caused me to ultimately, over the course of time, lose some quality in my voice and then lose my voice altogether at a certain point. So it took me years to unravel the tension patterns that had caused that issue. And once I understood that it was muscle tension and had the tools to unravel that muscle tension, it was actually a much easier and more joyful process than it had been to start really getting my voice back up to par and really ultimately beyond where I started.
Amazing. And you can often say about let's say teachers and vocal experts that when they've genuinely gone through or walked through the mud, shall we say, of like terrible vocal issues and stuff, you come out the other side being a lot more empathetic to stuff and reassuring that, I've done it, you can do it. It's a horrible journey, but hey, what an experience to have. Okay, yeah. So with today's show, you've got a couple of things you really want to share with us, which we're quite excited about.
Yeah.
Why don't you take us into your first subject? You've named it Impulse.
Yeah, so like I said, I teach this class called How Your Voice Works, and in my opinion, the first step of how our voices work is that we have to have an impulse, right? There has to be some sort of a desire to speak or sing, right? If we don't have a desire to speak or sing, then we just don't. We don't open our mouth, we don't start. But the really tricky thing about being a singer is that most of the time, we are in a situation where we know what we're supposed to sing. In other words, we have a song, we have what I might call a map of how the song is supposed to go. And so the really tricky balance is, how do I follow the map of this song, the rules of the song, which is, I enter on beat 1 and the tempo is this and et cetera, et cetera. How do we follow the map, but also marry it with our own impulses so that it feels like it's truly something that we want to be saying? And, this is actually something that I relate to very strongly because a lot of my early training as a singer was so technical that it ignored this issue of how to bring myself into the song. And so this is something I now feel very passionately about.
I think it's brilliant. That's it's a conversation we have quite a lot, isn't it? On I guess another way to say it is the difference between the question when we ask, how do you become authentic, which is a buzzword in the industry, it's like, how do I become an authentic performer? And it's a similar, I guess the same thing as what you're saying there, is how to bring out that you in the performance. Yeah. So how do you do it?
Okay, so I had this question for a long time, and as you mentioned, I went to grad school at the University of Alberta, and I got an MFA in theater voice pedagogy, and I had all these big questions. Part of the reason I went to Alberta is because I had started teaching before I went to graduate school, and students would ask me questions, and I'd go, that's a great question. Get back to me in 6 months and I'll have an answer for you. You know what I mean? So one of my big questions was, where do impulses come from? I was really curious about where these impulses, where do they start in our body? Because, I am actually certified in yoga as well, and very, I consider myself as much a movement teacher as I do a voice teacher. And so I'm curious in our body where impulses come from. And I had this revelation one day. I study with someone named Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who she teaches a technique. She's created a technique called body-mind centering. And I was in one of Bonnie's workshops, I guess it was last October, so it was a year ago. And the light bulb went off, and I walked up to Bonnie sort of slowly, a little bit wide-eyed like a zombie. And I looked at her and I said, Bonnie, impulses come from our cells. And the word I'm saying, of course, is, cells, like cells in our body, right? And she just smiled and nodded at me and said, because it was one of those things where she'd been trying to teach me that for a while, right? But impulses come from our cells because, we have all this language in our English language. We say things like, I could feel it in the soles of my feet, or I felt a tingle up my spine, or I knew in my gut, I knew in my heart. We have a lot of language that indicates that our desires and our impulses come from our body, but really they start down all the way at the cellular level, at the building blocks, and they can come from cells anywhere in our body. And that's why we might refer to different organs, different systems, because ultimately the way the nervous system works is we have peripheral sequences up to central, which is our brain and our spinal cord, right? Sends the message to the mothership, and then the mothership sends a message back down about how to respond. So when the mothership receives information, it's receiving it from the cellular level.
So your job right now is to try and manipulate that process, or at least use it in your singers to then help them to portray their music in the right way.
Yeah, and it's about, I think there's something very powerful that happens when you say to a singer, feel your cells, tap into your cellular awareness is maybe it's a buzzword that we use in somatic practices and movement techniques. And when you start to tap into the cellular level, it just brings you really close and in contact with your impulses. So even just to take a moment and close your eyes and feel the vibration. We have 10 trillion. Actually, I think there are numbers now that say we have 50 trillion cells in our body. I've heard both of those numbers. And so to just even consider the profundity of that fact is, crazy. And then if you take all 50 trillion of those cells into your song, you can't leave yourself behind in that case. You can't just do technique and leave your impulses behind, right?
Sounds really tiring. It's a lot. Does that require a lot of energy? Oh my God, I gave you every one of my trillion cells there, guys. Come on. Give me an applause. Just give me just one applause. Yeah. So if we're talking about someone who's at home and they're I don't know, how do you diagnose this? You're going to need somebody's objective eye to go, hang on, your performance may be a little bit lacking in energy, or the vocal qualities are just a little bit plain or too balanced. I presume that's your diagnosis for people who need to work on this some more?
Yeah, so I'm going to offer a tool that I like to play with. So I made up this thing. I'm sure someone else has probably made up a similar thing in their life. It's called the truthometer. I call it the truthometer. And the truthometer is like, if I believe you, if I'm watching you and I'm really swept away by your performance and it feels, authentic and the emotion feels genuine to me, then you're high on the truthometer. And if you're not, then you're like on the bullshit meter, right? It's low, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Do you only mention that part of it when you're in the door of that workshop? then you can start swearing. Yeah.
Totally. And the truth is that the cool thing about, I do this gesture for the truthometer and the bullshit zones down here, right? And the cool thing about using this terminology is that it's not even offensive to anyone. It doesn't have to be offensive, because you can say I don't believe you. That felt like bullshit to me. It's no reflection on that person's humanity and value as a singer, but it's just like, that one wasn't great, So I have this truthometer thing, and a lot of times what we have to do is go way, way back to what does it feel like to make sound? So I'm going to lead you guys in a pretty goofy exercise. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, go on then.
Of course we are.
You ready? Okay.
Do I need a vocal zone lozenge and a straw?
Probably
warm-up
a
first?
straw, yeah,
Let me just get one. Okay, let's go. Right, ready.
Get one.
So, so I'm certified in something called Fitzmaurice voice work, which is a theater voice technique. And in Fitzmaurice, we have this term we call just sighing out like on a little bit of air with some vibration. We call it fluffy sound. So a fluffy sound might sound something like this. So will you guys do a fluffy sound with me? Nice, yeah. And sometimes it's a sigh, or sometimes, and we don't really lengthen the vibration. So a lot of times, if you ask someone to make a sound like that, especially because it might sort of feel like I don't make sounds like that in public, you know? So a lot of times, if I ask a student to make a sound like that, they can't at first, right? There's like they're cut off, and like the idea of sighing out a fluffy sound feels foreign and crazy. I either speak language, or I shut up, or I sing, right? And so the fluffy sound can be a kind of cool gateway to figuring out whether you're connected to your cells and your impulses, because what you do is you make a fluffy sound and then you ask yourself, did that feel true? And if it felt true, great, you did it. And if it felt like bullshit, you know, then you didn't do it. So like if I make a fluffy sound that's like, that's probably me pushing to make a sound as opposed to really the sound that I wanted to make in that moment, right? So so we'll just do like, you know, let's do 3 or 4 fluffy sounds. We can do it all together right now, and it'll free up the listeners to feel like they can do this with us, right? So we'll just make a couple fluffy sounds, and just we'll have a conversation afterwards about whether it felt like you could make sounds that felt true or not. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. We're all gonna make some fluffy sounds. Here we go. We don't have to do it all at the same time.
We got lag.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to start just to give us permission. Here we go.
That was fake. That one was
I know,
fake.
I felt it. I felt that was fake. I mean, you don't even tell me. 'Cause I knew. I did it. Who's he anyway? Like, you're the expert.
Oh, that one got me.
I actually didn't necessarily get a huge bullshit reading in that moment, I have to be honest. But
Was it that? It was that, wasn't it?
it was like, you know, halfway.
It was coming out.
Like,
Definitely coming out.
So yeah, this is just, I mean, I think you guys get the point of the exercise. I think the listeners can get the point of the exercise. And obviously, if you want to do this, you know, in the comfort of your own bedroom without people listening to you, that's a really safe way to start. But it's really interesting to just tap into, can I make a sound that feels true to me? Because if I can't even start there, then when we add all of the elements of hitting certain notes in a certain rhythm with accompaniment, et cetera, then how are we supposed to carry our truthfulness and authenticity into that moment, right?
So if someone's doing well at that exercise and they feel like they did create their authentic sound, where do they go from there, having ticked that box?
Yeah. So then, you know, there's so much that you can do in between getting to the point where you're performing. But I think the next thing is to go into your warm-up routine, to go into your scales, etc. And can you know, with something like a scale, we're not necessarily going to be like, that was the most beautiful scale that I ever wanted to sing in this moment. You know, sometimes we are truly just doing a technical exercise, and that's fine. But it's just about starting to bring our awareness to if we bring our awareness to the idea, does that feel true? Then the more and more we shine a light on that concept, the more we can catch ourselves in bullshit zone, you know, and be like, I just sang a line and I wasn't even thinking about what it meant, and I wasn't really connected. And actually, do you know where my brain was in that moment? I was worried about hitting the high note. And of course, if the singer is worried about hitting the high note and wasn't thinking about what they were saying, then do you think the audience understood what they were saying? Probably not, right?
Isn't another way to look at this is focus? Elissa,
Yeah.
do you think, you know, as in, you know, because if I just think about my, then, you know, there was a lot going on in my head at the time, in terms of...
I'm being filmed.
Yeah, I've got like an idiot sat next to me, you know, who's trying to be clever. But you know what I mean? So I can imagine that with students, with singers in general, one of the things that drags us away from that authenticity is the thought of which are other things that are happening in that moment. And so, look, whether it's people are watching me,
Or what, like self-consciousness?
Self-consciousness, yeah. And it's almost like the people that we believe that are authentic or true are the people that are also, at the same time, seem confident.
And less concerned with everything going on around
I'm doing my
them.
thing, I'm intent, I've got intent here, focus. So would that be another way to kind of describe it, do you think?
I think that's so beautiful. And, you know, I'll share with you that I'm also a meditator, and that's a huge part of my life and my practice. Yep. And,
We're best friends. That means we're best friends.
I'm on the outside, around about here.
That's okay. Chris, you're welcome inside anytime
it's fine.
you want, yeah?
I don't want to come inside.
Is it fine?
That's totally fine.
No, I like it out here.
That's totally great. There's so many ways towards the same thing, and meditation's one of them. And I'll just share that what I've learned from meditation that I carry so heavily into the way I teach is this idea that you're talking about of focus and how to, because the thing is, the nature of the human brain is to think. We can't stop ourselves from thinking. But so much of what we're doing as singers is mindset stuff. So I think if we get good at focusing on the primary thing that's necessary in the moment and letting the other thoughts be there, but just not grabbing onto them, not like following them and trying to figure out the significance of them and what they mean, then that's good. So really, in any moment that we're performing, what is the most important thing? It is communicating our message to the audience. That's the thing. That's the important thing. And all of that technical stuff that you've done before that moment, I like to call that homework, right? That's the homework. And if we go back to this idea of your cells, it lives in your cells. Our cells have a cellular memory. And when we do our scales, when we practice stuff, when we run through the song multiple times, our cells learn that stuff and retain that stuff. And then instead of needing to manage it in performance, we can trust that it's there. So that allows for focus. And I suppose the reason I brought up meditation is that what doing a mantra-based meditation has taught me is that I can focus on one thing. It is possible to focus on a primary thing and let the other stuff be there and not worry about it as much.
Excellent.
It's not easy, but it's possible.
Yeah, like anything, takes a lot of practice, and this kind of practice, because it isn't necessarily muscle patterns and coordination, it can feel a bit far out to know when it's actually in you and whether you're doing it right. Let's face it, because you have to be able to look at yourself in an honest way and think, is that correct? Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it's so important to have a coach, to have a teacher, to have people to reflect for you. But the cool thing that I like about the Truthometer is it is a tool that you can use for self-assessment. And at the beginning, you're probably going to have people validate for you, like, that felt true to me. Did it feel true to you? Do you think that was an authentic version of that song, etc.? But as you go on, I think the confidence comes from knowing that we can produce the results that we want to produce. You know, the confidence comes from the practice and comes from the focus and the awareness and the connection to ourselves on a full body cellular level, you know?
Elissa, today you were also going to talk to us about your thoughts on breathing, including a special technique, which sounds like a Street Fighter special move, I'd like to say. But if you'd like to bring us on to your next subject of breathing, what's your thoughts on this area?
Oh yeah, okay. So I want to say something sort of controversial to start off, which is, you know how a lot of us have heard things or say things like breathe with your diaphragm. I certainly have said it. It's kind of a silly thing to say because it doesn't really mean anything because you can't breathe without your diaphragm, right? It's sort of like telling someone to walk with their feet. It's like, if I practice really hard, I maybe could walk on my hands, but I think I'm going to stick to my feet for now. You know what I mean?
I can do that. I can walk on my hands.
Can you carry on?
Sorry, Elissa, carry on.
That's not fair. Can you teach me? I would love it.
I can definitely teach it whenever you want.
He's lying.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry.
Meditation buddies.
Here you go.
You know.
So
hand
great.
walking
So
buddies.
most of us walk on our feet, right? So, and you guys know, I mean, I think I'd love to have a conversation about it. And I wrote a blog for you guys about this, about breathing with our diaphragms and why that doesn't really mean much. But So if we sort of very basically go over the anatomy of the diaphragm is a muscle that bisects the torso, right? And it connects all around the base of the rib cage. So I really like helping people embody things. So if the listeners, as they're listening right now, want to just sort of trace their hands, and you guys can do it too, along the bottom of your rib cage, which obviously at the center and the front is a little bit higher, and then it goes down a little bit, and then it's pretty actually often low on the sides and around to the back, right? And your rib cage is, of course, in 360 degrees. You guys having fun there?
Yeah. I just can't. Whenever it comes to like touching bodies close to each other, it just gets weird. It just.
Maybe I can feel yours and you can do mine.
On you.
You know, honestly, that's a very good voice exercise. We'll get to that next. And so that's so sweet. And so our diaphragm connects all the way around the base of our rib cage, right? And then honestly, if you took your diaphragm out of context, out of your body, and just plopped it down on the floor, which obviously I don't recommend, but if you did that, it would just be a sheet of muscle, right? It like wouldn't have a shape. The reason our diaphragm has that dome shape is because there's the stuff below it and the stuff above it holding it into that shape, right? Like sort of forming it into that shape. And so really the diaphragm's a muscle, and muscles do two things. Muscles, they contract and they release. That's all it does. When the diaphragm contracts, there's a central tendon that is anchored to the heart and, you know, really pretty strongly anchored there. It doesn't have much movement. So the central tendon and the fibers coming off the central tendon, when it tenses, it's going to pull the sides of the diaphragm up, meaning it's going to raise the sides of the rib cage in 360 degrees, right? It's also going to flatten a little bit because the lungs are expanding and filling with air, and so they're pressing down on the diaphragm. So I like to often, you know, make sort of a shape with my hands, kind of like a jellyfish, and then just like a jellyfish, when we inhale, it sort of widens and flattens. I don't know if jellyfish are technically inhaling in that moment, but they move like this. And then when the jellyfish, you know, releases, it goes back into a dome shape more, right? And that's how a jellyfish locomotes, and that's how our diaphragm moves. So you can think about your diaphragm like a jellyfish. And then, of course, when your diaphragm flattens and widens, it presses down on the visceral organs beneath it, right? And that's your stomach, that's your pancreas, that's your large and small intestines, and your liver, etc. So, and for the sake of this visualization, you can imagine that all of those visceral organs are contained in a sac, because indeed they are. It's called the peritoneal sac. It's sort of like a water balloon, right? And so when the diaphragm pushes down, when it contracts is the technical term I should use, and pushes down on all of this, the water balloon, it's not getting bigger, it's not filling with more stuff because the air is not going down there, but the water balloon is going to change shape because it's getting pushed from above, right? The pattern of how all of this happens and exactly where we expand, whether it's more vertical, more horizontal, more front to back, that depends on, you know, freedom and patterns of tension in every individual and unique body. And so yes, it's true that a lot of times we need to free up tension that's inhibiting the free movement of the diaphragm. In other words, we need to allow our diaphragm to move more, but that's really a more accurate way of saying it. I have a yoga teacher named Leslie Kaminoff who teaches anatomy, who I've learned so much from, and he's actually a guest lecturer in the breathing module of my course, How Your Voice Works. And Leslie likes to say that the diaphragm's sort of like a cheetah. A cheetah, the inherent nature of a cheetah is to run, right? If you put a cheetah in a cage, the cheetah doesn't have the space to run. It's not going to be a very happy cheetah. If you put a cheetah in a field, then the cheetah can run around and you know, explore its true nature. So basically, instead of saying breathe with your diaphragm, because really it's always moving when you're breathing, breathing is the shape change of the cavity above and below it, the chest cavity and the abdominal cavity. So if you're always moving your diaphragm when you breathe, then it's not really breathe with your diaphragm, it's allow your diaphragm to move more freely, right? That's what we're really saying. So that's kind of a little, you know, crash course in the anatomy, which then can lead us to this breath support idea, which is what I wanted to talk about. So if the goal of the inhalation to set our breathing up for voice and speech is to make as much space for the lungs to expand so that we can get as much air as possible, then that basically means that the diaphragm needs to be free to move down and the rib cage needs to be free in 3 dimensions to expand, right? That's going to be a healthy inhalation for voice and speech is going to be expanding the chest or thoracic cavity. So then the question is, what are we doing on the exhalation? And now the exhalation is when we're actually doing the work of speech and singing, which is kind of 180 degrees different than it is throughout the day. You know, when we're sleeping, the work happens on the inhalation in our breathing pattern, and then the recoil, the easy part, is on the exhalation, right? Like if you ask any human being on the street, take a deep breath, they inhale and do the work on the inhalation, and then they relax on the exhalation, right? But voice or speech put us in a situation where the work is happening on the exhalation. So we have to actually 180 degrees flip our pattern in order to support voice and speech, right? We have to actually do something to allow the exhalation to be supported. Maybe not a lot, but something, right? And so the argument that I like to make, which, you know, you've talked to so many experts on this show, and there are different opinions about this, but my opinion is that the abdominal muscles can help change the shape of that water balloon that we're talking about, the abdominal water balloon, which when we change the shape of it and distend the water balloon up back to the diaphragm, it supports the diaphragm as the diaphragm is floating back up into its dome shape. So now here's the thing. If I'm shouting, hey, really loudly across a train station to try to get someone's attention, then my low belly muscles might truly you would like see them go inward pretty extremely. If I'm just saying hi to you guys in this moment, then my abdominal support is not super intense, right? And lots of people say lots of different things about what the abdominal muscles could be doing, or some people believe the abdominal muscles should not be very involved and that it's more about the rib cage. There's so many different opinions about where to squeeze the mechanism, you know, or not really squeeze, where to support the mechanism. And really, ultimately, they're just all in service of getting those visceral organs up underneath the diaphragm to sort of break or control the flow of the diaphragm as it moves back upwards into that dome shape. And I do really believe that this low belly activation is the most efficient way. And it was learning this effectively, training my frozen ballet body out of non-movement into support in this way was a really important part of my healing process when I was getting my voice back. So let me teach you the ninja thing, shall I?
Yes, please.
This is exactly what I want. I don't want anything less.
Do I need a sword?
We'll all be ninjas by the end of this for sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a breathing technique that actually comes from yoga. So I'm stealing this 100% from yoga. This is a yoga breathing technique. It's called breath of fire. Get ready for this. The fancy Sanskrit word for it, or Sanskrit if you want to pronounce that way, is Kapalabhati. And I'll have to probably write it down as I say it to you, but that is spelled Kapalabhati, Kapalabhati, for
How'd you
anyone
cook
listening
it?
that wants to look it up. Yeah?
Oh, nothing.
How do you cook it?
How'd you cook that? It
It's
was
really
a rubbish
delicious
joke,
dish.
but we'll leave it in the edit.
I love it. It's so Kapalabhati, or breath of fire, is what it means. And it's also another way it's sometimes referred to as skull shining breath, because there can be this quality of energy that you get where it feels like your skull's sort of glowing when you do it. So something maybe really important to say that I haven't mentioned yet is that our voice flows up and out of us, right? The directionality of the airflow, the directionality of voice, honestly, the directionality of our emotions get out of our body up and out, right? So if we're thinking of our voice like a toothpaste tube, if we squeeze from the bottom of the toothpaste tube, all of the toothpaste goes up and out. Whereas if we squeeze from somewhere in the middle of the toothpaste tube, some of it goes down, some of it goes up. You have to do more work to squeeze from the bottom to get it out, right? So basically, this breath of fire is going to train our body what it feels like to squeeze from the bottom of the toothpaste tube to really activate from the bottom of the system. So the way that we do this is it's actually going to be in and out through our nose right now to do the yoga technique. And we're going to breathe out through our nose sort of forcefully. And you'll probably draw in your low belly, and you may find that your chest sort of like slightly lifts as you breathe out. So just try that once. Yeah, and it's going to be actually a quick little fast spurt of breath. So,
All right. I think I should blow my nose before I do this.
actually, honestly, your nose is about to get really clear. Yeah. So you do that, and then the inhalation is a recovery, and then we'll do it 18 times. Okay, so I can demonstrate for a second. And is this gonna sound crazy if I breathe my nose breath onto the microphone?
I think that's fine if you do.
You guys like it? Okay, good. Ready? Here we go. It goes like this. You want to join in with me? Ready? I lost count. Good. Go ahead and do one long exhalation. One long inhalation through your nose. And another long exhalation. Okay. Amazing.
I feel really good
I
after
have some
that.
oxygen in my head for a change.
Feel it? Can you feel that skull shining thing?
I think you can, can't you, right now?
Oh yeah.
It's sending energy up, right? It's teaching our body this pattern. Okay, so now before we do it one more time, I just want to say like the really important thing to watch out for, which is the opposite can start to happen for someone that's not paying close attention. What we call the opposite is the poopy breath. And the poopy breath is the one that squeezes in and pushes down in the direction of that stuff, right? And is not actually helpful for training the directionality of your voice, right? So a poopy breath might sort of look like I'm squeezing my shoulders and bearing down energetically as I exhale. So if I demonstrate that, and maybe we can even hear the difference in the sound, it's like... That's not what it is, right? It's not squeezing in and pushing down while we exhale. It's drawing the low belly in and allowing the energy and prana, if you will, or actually it's technically called in yoga, it's technically called apana because it's going out, to go up and out, right? Instead of down. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's do it. This time I actually will count. Let's do it 18 times. We're going to draw in the low belly and breathe out through our nostrils. And then the inhalation is just a really easy recovery. We probably will hear it come in through the nostrils a bit just because of the turbulence of the small openings. But we're going to breathe out 18 times. Here we go. Long one out. Long breath in. Long breath out.
And there we
Nice.
go. Shiny skull?
Shiny
Mate.
skull.
Shiny skull. Shiny skull.
So which I'm interested from the anatomical point of view, which muscles from your perspective are specifically being activated in that?
I love it. You want me to go into this debate, yeah?
Yeah, I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I would love
Debate.
it. I believe so in Fitzmaurice voice work, which is where I first encountered this idea of drawing in the low belly to support, we call it, in that practice, we call it transverse support. And the belief in that practice is that it really is primarily the transverse abdominis. Since that time, I have an amazing colleague and friend named Joan Melton who has been doing some research and looking at ultrasounds of all three layers of the abdominal muscles, which for people who are not familiar, the deepest layer is the transverse abdominis. The next layer is the internal and external obliques. And then the most superficial layer is the rectus abdominis, or our six-pack, or as I like to call it, our eight-pack, because it actually is an eight-pack and we all have it. It just might be obscured by other things, right? So there's three layers there, and really ultimately they're all being used. And actually here's a really interesting fact that completely blew my mind when I learned it, which is the rectus abdominis, the outermost layer, as we get closer down towards the pubic bone, it actually dives down and becomes the deepest layer. At the pubic bone, the rectus is actually the deepest insertion. So really, ultimately, I think it's very valuable to think about the transverse leading the way. And the reason for that is because the transverse has those horizontal fibers, which means that using the low belly is not going to implicate a rib squeeze up higher, right? You can draw in the low belly and allow the rib cage to still be relatively free. But truth be told, looking at a ultrasound of all three layers, they're all moving, they're all involved. And it's really impossible to tease them apart, really. one cue that I do think is really helpful for finding that transverse support is instead of the action where you tense your belly like someone is going to punch you in the belly and you want to protect your organs, that is a primarily rectus abdominis action because those fibers go up and down. That's kind of like brings us into a sit-up, and it does tend to contract the rib cage, which is not so valuable for freedom of the diaphragm. If we instead think about trying to get really skinny, like we're trying to put a skinny pair of jeans on and we want to button that button, but we really need, you like when you do that, you often find that your rib cage actually expands and you try to grow taller. So if you think about that action of trying to get skinny to get into your skinny extra small jeans, that's often a really good cue to find that sort of transverse leading action. Do you guys agree with that?
There's a clinic in London called Physio Ed. Are you familiar with those guys at all?
I don't know that I am.
No, they're like osteopaths, laryngeal massage as well, right? But they're primarily and voice users and performing artists in general. And they do a lot of work on that, and they ultrasound people in their studio. Where they're trying to see more, they're trying to get the singers, like if you're on all fours and you sing, or no, if you're in prayer, like on your knees with your head on your hands, or if you're led back, there's less activity in the internal obliques because they're not in a supporting role anymore, and the transverse abdominis can be active, and they do ultrasound you whilst you're singing to try and see a little less activity in the internal obliques and a little more in the transverse, so that you can see them all working together. It's just sometimes one of the layers, which is not the deep one, is leading the way, and they're too strong for the singer, and then they're so linked to pharyngeal constriction that I agree with you on the transverse abdominis front. It's a big world being opened up at the moment.
The fact that we have the technology to even start to pay attention to that and see if the transverse is working a little bit harder and the obliques are turning off a little bit is stunning and amazing. That's so cool.
Yes. And there's another lady in the UK called Debbie Winter who does a lot of research in breathing, and she kind of puts a great argument out there of like, here's both sides of the story, and we don't know who's right. So, like some people work well, some people don't. So it's, the views are still, as far as we're in like 2016, so many of these things are still cloudy, really, aren't they?
Yeah, and I kind of love that that's the case. I have a lot of colleagues who I love and respect and have gained so much from working with, who really are sort of more on the breathing coordination side, which is basically the idea that everything is coordinated and working all together, and there's we want to not really allow any leadership anywhere in the breathing activity. And I think that's really valuable too. And I think every individual body is unique and different. And so it's really, really important that we pay attention to our own patterns of engagement and just be curious about them, right? Because machines can measure us, but ultimately if we pay attention to ourselves, if we pay attention to what we perceive to be the feeling of engaging our oblique versus our transverse, we're probably going to be our best judge of that, of what's valuable and what's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, I don't know, you'd see people in the studio, and certainly I've heard, stories from other coaches who might say, according to this method of breathing, your breathing is horrendous. You know what I mean? Like, I assess you with my knowledge and you are rubbish, right? but that singer is fine. Like, fine. Because that's another way to look at it, isn't it? Is that rigidity in the technique. Like, breathing patterns are individual. And there is research to show that there is somebody can produce the same sound differently to somebody else in terms of breathing patterns and both be as healthy as each other. So it's a mad world out there. Everyone's right and wrong.
Kind of. I mean, I like to say
anything.
I like to say about breathing. I give up. I like to say about breathing too that everyone's really good at it. If you're here and you're alive, you're doing it great. You win. Do you know what I mean? The reason we have so many different ways of breathing is because that gives us so many different ways of staying alive. And let's not forget that breathing is primarily for that purpose first before it's to support our voice and our speech. It's amazing that we can do both. But really, I think ultimately what we want to be after is freedom of the ability to breathe in different ways that serve different situations. Because if we take a step back, we can really say there is no good and bad form of breathing. There's just what is good for one circumstance and what is good for another circumstance. There's just circumstantial, you know?
So to kind of wrap us up on this subject, I'm interested to see, is, in your opinion, is that exercise enough, much like your impulses one, to draw attention to the activity of the area, so that in singing one can notice the same, or let's say a slightly less pronounced movement of that? Or do you feel like it's actually another technique in order to take that actually to voicing?
Yeah, good question. So I don't think that what I just taught, I don't think that the breath of fire, the Kapalabhati, I don't think it's the easiest exercise. And I'm teaching it here on this podcast, knowing that you have a pretty educated listenership and that people really are curious and want to go deep with this stuff. So
a few idiots, I think. There's a few idiots. But, yeah,
you find them.
And so I don't think it's necessarily the first or easiest exercise to do, just to be fair. But what I do think is if you're locked in a pattern of rib squeeze, which is something that I was locked into for a while, or if you are tense in your throat, or if you can do Kapalabhati, if you can do breath of fire accurately, then your body has found the pattern of engagement that is squeezing the low part and allowing it to flow up and out, which is what our voice needs. So I think that if you can find that pattern, then your body now has a kinesthetic awareness of what that feels like that can move into maybe doing some more traditional singing or, spoken voice support exercises, and ultimately making sure that you are supporting when you're performing. So again, I think there can be plenty of steps in between, but the cool thing about it is that if you can't find this pattern and then you do find it, you've kind of switched, you've flipped a switch that allows you to really, your body to kinesthetically get it.
Right. Then it becomes a little bit more autonomous.
Yeah, I think it just allows us to really get embodied with this concept of supporting from the bottom up.
Right. Yeah, I think embodied is the cracking word. So, because... and that it gives reason to why yoga and the mindset that is used in yoga is really valuable for singers in general. It's a self-awareness, right? Because you say, like, you could walk into a studio and a teacher and go, "You're breathing wrong." It's like, well, am I? And you don't know, because it's such an intrinsic activity to breathe, right? You can't tell me if I'm breathing wrong. So to get good at it yourself, to learn it yourself, and to explore the way that you breathe and the many ways that you can breathe is probably a great way to go about it. Probably the best way to go about it, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, and I think it's kind of damaging to tell someone that they're breathing wrong, because it is a pattern that they've learned, and they've obviously learned it for a reason, and it's helped for some reason. And when we learn new habits anyway, we're not obliterating the old ones. We're just creating new neural pathways for new options. So to ever tell someone that, the neural pathway that they've created is terrible is kind of silly, in my opinion. So, maybe we can all be nicer to each other and just stop saying silly things like that, right?
I like the teachers who slag everyone off, because then all their clients come to me. So they make us look good. So
Win-win.
Crack on. It's fine.
Yeah, totally. Say the crazy things. And in all fairness, the students who come and take How Your Voice Works from me, I actually work with so many voice teachers in my class, and then also with lots of singers and public speakers and performers. And a lot of times their teachers have said this stuff to them, and maybe even, I sometimes have the teacher who goes, I said that to like a lot of my students up till now. That's okay. That's great. I'm so glad you're here now. That's great. Let's have a conversation about it so that we can just, say things with more accuracy and more openness.
Yes.
Sure.
Right on. We've all been there at some point, many times.
Many times, yeah.
Let me just wind back what I told you for 5 years.
Did you record that? Hopefully not. Yeah.
You could just forget some of that stuff that I mentioned, because I know better now, right? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, wow. Well, a couple of wonderful nuggets, shall we say, of information. So you mentioned earlier of your wonderful course, How Your Voice Works. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about it and where people can find out about that?
Of course. So basically the course is split into 7 modules, and we actually dove into 2 of them today to some depth, although I said plenty of things today that I don't say in the course, and there are plenty of things in the course that I didn't say today. So the basic idea is that I believe that there are 7 steps. We can break down how our voice works from the idea, the moment of wanting to speak, through the actual moment of uttering the sentence or the phrase or whatever it is. And those steps are that we have an impulse to speak, and then our body responds to that impulse. And a huge part of that body response is breathing, is breath. So impulse, body, and breath are the first 3 modules. And then after that, when the airflow is traveling up our windpipe and encounters our vocal folds, that's the onset of sound. So that's the 4th module. The 5th module goes into resonance, which is all the stuff that happens when the sound starts bouncing around inside the vocal tract. You guys have talked about that type of stuff on the show lots. So resonance is the 5th module. And then the 6th module is articulation, which is how we shape the flow through consonants and vowels and our articulators. And then finally, the 7th step is language, is it coming out as, understandable communication. So basically we dive into each of those steps in a module, and the modules are 15 to 30 minutes long. So it's really, it's pretty digestible, and there's 2 exercises per module to help you embody the learning. We did a couple of those exercises today. And then when you're done, you get a certificate of completion, and there's further study that people can do with me. But it's really, I think that it's a course that I've really worked on designing to be both practical. I think you can tell I love anatomy, and I think it's important to understand how the machine works, but also just like, Steve, you latched onto that word embodiment, and I think it's so important too. It's all about understanding and then embodying. I think that's a really important step-by-step process. First we understand, then we have to feel it, right? First we think it, then we feel it, and then ultimately in the performance process, we just forget it and let it happen. But knowing all that stuff fills our cells with more knowledge, and I love that. So, and
if anybody's lost and reading the blog post or wants to go back and review it, we'll put all the links in the blog post to the website there and the course. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Elissa. Once again,
it's my pleasure.
Brilliant stuff and a wide range of interest for everyone. And no doubt we'll get you on again soon.
I would love to come anytime. I adore you guys. Thank you so much for having a conversation with me.
No worries.
Thank you.
There she runs.
There she toddles.
Trotting off down, what is it, 5th Avenue probably?
Probably that
Something
one, yeah.
Like
That's my favourite one, that one.
Yeah. If you have any questions for Elissa and any questions about this episode, do get in touch with us via thenakedvocalist.com. Also, if you're interested in any of Elissa's material or her products, her course, How Your Voice Works, you can find more information about that at thenakedvocalist.com/How Your Voice Works with no spaces. Just to let you know, these are affiliate links, so if you choose to go ahead with anything, it does support the podcast.